Thanks for joining today's resume workshop. This is a two-part series with part one focusing on resume basics and part two is a panel discussion with Flinn Scholar alumni. In this video, we'll cover the differences between a resume and CV, as well as go over the components of a strong resume. The focus of this workshop is on resumes, but as college students, you'll start to hear about this thing called a CV. On this slide, you'll see the differences between the two. A resume is a concise document that is 1 or 2 pages long. It is typically used in many fields and highlights your work experience and skill set. A CV is a comprehensive academic record. It is a detailed document and can be multiple pages long. A CV is most relevant to those who work in academic, scientific, and medical fields. This document emphasizes academic activities and awards. Like a resume, a CV includes an education section. Unlike a resume, a CV outlines all of your honors and awards, publications you may have, research experience, teaching experience, any talks or presentations you may have done at a conference, as well as listing your involvement in professional groups or associations. An important note I want to make here: service doesn't necessarily mean volunteer service in the community. On a CV, service typically means a task force, committee, or some field-specific volunteer work. Okay, it's time for a resume crash course. If you have a resume, now would be a good time to open that document. That way you can reference it as we go through each section. Some of this information may be familiar to you already, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page in our understanding of the foundations of an effective resume before we get to the alumni panel in part two of this series. On this slide, you'll see a list of sections that are included on a resume: header, summary statement, which is optional, education, different experiences like work, leadership, and so on, skills including certifications, and that last bullet lists some sections that we've seen on resumes but are typically considered optional. As we go through each section, I want to remind you that resume readers, just like any setting where you are getting evaluated, bring in their own set of biases. What stands out to me on a resume is different than what might stand out to the alumni panelists. I share that so you don't get stuck on making a perfect resume because there isn't one right way to create a resume. Your resume should have your contact information at the top of the page. Include your name, email, cell, city, and a LinkedIn or a personal website. This section is optional, but I have seen these on undergraduate resumes. Here you are essentially highlighting your strengths in a sentence or two. If you decide to include a summary statement on your resume, it is best to tailor it to whatever role or opportunity you are applying to. At the bottom of this slide, you'll see an example of a general summary statement written by a student. The first section of your resume is your educational background. Here you should list your university, degree, minor certificate, and GPA. I've seen scholars list their study abroad experiences, and you all will have one or more to put in this section. The last two are optional, and you should use your judgment. If you have limited experience, relevant coursework is good to list. Awards can be listed here or also in its own section further down on your resume. The next section of a resume is the essence of the document. This section is typically focused on employment or work, but students participate in different activities. I've seen scholars break up their experience section into categories like leadership, volunteer/service, or research. It depends on what you're applying for and where your strengths lie. Again, there is no one right way in creating a resume. In all of these experiences, you should list your role or position in the organization along with your dates of participation. Each role should have 2 to 3 bullet points. Although we won't spend too much time practicing writing bullet points, I did want to provide some questions for you to consider as you write about your experiences. What did you do? How did you do it? What impact did you make? It's like what we tell students applying to the Flinn Scholarship. We get many applications from students participating in similar clubs in different schools across the state. What's telling is the difference you made in that role. This is where you can highlight your skills in leadership, communication, collaboration, analysis, etc. Use those action verbs to showcase your impact. Okay, now we're getting towards the bottom of the resume. The skills section should contain any languages you know. For example, Spanish, French. Programming languages count too, like Python or Java. For technical skills, you might list Google or Office Suite, or any certificates you have. For those involved in research, you might be picking up some specific skills in softwares or programs, like surveys, MATLAB, SPSS, and so on. Lastly, you might have industry or field-specific skills to list. This is my catch-all section. I've seen resumes list interests, hobbies, projects, awards towards the end of a resume. These are all optional. Again, every resume reader is different, so I encourage you to watch the alumni discussion in part 2 of the series for their thoughts on these sections. Alright, to wrap this up, if you haven't done so already, it would be good to start a comprehensive resume where you are tracking all your activities and accomplishments. You can then work on tailoring it to a specific role or position. I do encourage you to create your own resume first and then seek input and feedback. Seek feedback from a near peer, so someone a year or two ahead of you, a professor or faculty mentor, someone in your field, or perhaps one of our alums. Finally, I know generative AI is a tool you might use at some point to help you with your resume. It can be a powerful tool in enhancing your resume for clarity or tailoring a resume for different opportunities. That said, taking the time to reflect on your experiences may result in a stronger, thoughtful resume. This is also a good time to share that some resumes are not always evaluated by humans. If you're applying via an application tracking system, your resume is being reviewed by a machine first. There's something called keywords you'll want to make sure are on your resume so you can beat the algorithm. It's a good practice to carefully read a position description and try to align your resume with the desired qualifications, which is where you'll find some of the keywords. This concludes part 1 of the resume workshop. I encourage you to watch part 2, where you will hear from a panel of Flinn Scholar alumni speakers. The conversation covers a range of topics, including how to highlight your leadership and extracurricular activities on your resume, and tips for how to make your resume stand out.